All right, second graders, let's start to talk about our next project, which is going to be a sculpture inspired by something in a famous museum called the Art Institute of Chicago. So let's look at some pictures really quick here. Now, looking at these pictures here, I'm going to ask you as a class, what do we see in these pictures? I'm going to pause the video, take a minute to look at these two pictures here, and tell me a couple things you see. All right, now let's look at these next two pictures. Tell me a few more things you see. All right, now what if I told you, class, that these pictures are actually not real rooms, they are sculptures. Look very closely at these three images here. These little tiny rooms inside of these windows are what we just saw in these pictures. They are actually little tiny miniature rooms, and they were sculpted by an artist. So these are an exhibit in the Art Institute of Chicago. They're called the Thorn Rooms. So if you go to the Art Institute in Chicago, you can walk through these hallways of the museum. You can look in these tiny little windows and see these little tiny miniature sculptures. Each room looks like a different time period. So some rooms look a little bit more modern, some rooms look a little bit older, and each of these rooms was made by an artist. So if you look very closely, you can see the artist here who is using some tools to help them sculpt these tiny little pieces. You can open up the windows here and the artist can go inside and kind of fix things and clean things up. But each of these, look how tiny the pieces are. They're very tiny little sculptures. So we're going to get some inspiration from those Thorn Rooms at the Art Institute to make our own tiny little miniature room sculpture. So I showed you this image last week, and we talked about how we could use some sculpture techniques to show different things that might be inside of a room. So your goal is to make either one room or maybe multiple rooms put together using many sculpture techniques. So we have a few goals to meet for this project. Our first goal is that you must use at least 5 sculpture techniques or more using your paper or cardboard. So a sculpture technique would be a certain way that you cut, fold, or put pieces together to make something that looks like it's not flat like a piece of paper or a piece of cardboard, but it's actually kind of popping out like a sculpture piece. So these are the techniques. Remember, these are in the baskets at your table for you to look at. So using many sculpture techniques, and I just said you need to use at least 5 techniques to make many sculpture pieces for your room. You are also going to make sure that each of those pieces is carefully secure. So that means we're using tape or glue to attach them so that they're not kind of falling out of your room. They should be really nice and secure. Everything should stay put together in your room. Your last goal is to use your creativity to make your sculpture look like a specific room. So that means a type of room, like a bedroom, a kitchen, a video game room, a pool room, whatever you want. So at least one different type of room. Let's look at a couple sculptures that kids just like you have created using paper and cardboard with different sculpture techniques. Let's talk as a class about what we see here. So I'm going to pause the video again. Tell me some things that you recognize. Now tell me some things that you recognize and tell me how you think that they made these things. All right, let's look at another picture here, another cardboard and paper sculpture. What do we like about this room? Do you see anything else that you recognize? How do you think the artist created that piece of the room? All right, so we're going to start now. Remember your goals. We are going to talk next about how to make the little corner part of the room. So before you actually put the pieces inside of the room, everybody is going to make like a little tiny base, a floor and 2 walls to make these corner parts of each of the sections of your room. So I'm going to show you in my next video how to fold your paper to create this little tiny section of the room.